European Parliament has initiated legal action against European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Yes, she's
Wow.
becoming a media darling at this point. Over
Everywhere.
150 billion euros security action for Europe, safe defense fund. Oh, there's that word again.
Yeah.
Arguing that the Commission bypassed the EP's legislative authority, EP being obviously the European Parliament. So this was back in March 2025. European Commission rolled out a 150 billion euro defense initiative called the SAFE regulation, designed to help EU countries jointly purchase European-made military equipment. But instead of following the usual legislative route, oh, what a surprise, that includes the European Parliament, the Commission invoked Article 122 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU. Whatever. I mean, maybe we can look that up exactly.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know exactly what that stipulates. The Treaty on the Functioning of the EU.
It says now, like.
Okay. This rule typically is used for economic emergencies, like during the 2008 financial crisis or COVID-19. Well, this legal shortcut meant the Parliament was completely cut out of the decision-making process, which didn't sit well with many MEPs. Well, no surprises there.
So like, to understand this better, we have the European Commission and you have the European Parliament, but the European Commission completely overruled the European Parliament, and now the European Commission is being sued. Is that what I understand?
Particularly, I think it's Ursula von der Leyen.
Oh yeah,
because she's the president.
On the 24th of June, so 3 days ago.
Yeah.
The European Parliament's Legal Affairs Committee overwhelmingly voted to take the Commission to the European Court of Justice. And the complaint is that by bypassing Parliament, the Commission violated the EU treaties and undermined democratic oversight. So the Parliament insists it should have been involved, especially in such a massive spending plan. Here we go again. It's not just about procedure. It's about safeguarding the balance of power between the EU institutions. So we have like all these different institutions, and it's like some need permissions from others, but others are like taking initiative without asking the proper authorities.
Well, there you go. Because if they see fit to, because it's all, this is all kind of centralization of power, coming to a head. And it's basically what many people have warned about, in the past, in the basis of this whole European project, unfortunately, where, now we're just getting too political, too bureaucratic, and there is no accountability. And there you have it. So this is exactly like where there's no transparency in relation to this. Stuff gets done, and Okay. I think we have some. Well, no, we talked about the background. So you mentioned the legal challenge already. But the key points of this, right, of contention, right, are there's this democratic oversight, right? The EP, European Parliament, argues that the Commission's actions circumvented the established legislative process, and that's a pretty big no-no, right? This is depriving the Parliament, which, by the way, okay, people are maybe getting a bit confused here, but the Parliament still has. It's a body of elected officials, by the way, where the European countries or states, right? It doesn't matter, like France, Germany, where the citizens of those countries can actually vote and choose for the people that are representing still the countries in the Parliament. So these are the MEPs, okay? So that's what the Parliament is made up of. But that's where it ends. And that is the problem, because there have been MEPs in the past. I can mention one name that comes up, Nigel Farage. But love him or hate him, but he was right. But there have been many MEPs in the past, right, who kind of brought light to this, because they said, well, we were elected by our people to be here, to represent our people here. But you guys, and that's what they mentioned. They meant there's all these other levels, like the European Commission, the president, etc. They're not elected by the MEPs. They're not elected by, and this is the problem. So there's already been oversight for a long time. So the fact that now they're, starting to, criticize the commission over this, I don't know. I just think it's kind of funny, because this has been the case for a while. But yeah, so they circumvented the established legislative process, depriving the parliament of its rightful role in scrutinizing and approving significant financial instruments. And then, of course, there's the key point of institutional balance, because critics, including those from the Socialists and Democrats group, they assert that the Commission's approach threatens the institutional balance of the EU by consolidating power within the executive branch. Ho, ho, ho. This is exactly what people like Farage were warning about, because that is the problem, right? This is not unlike, for instance, what people have declared or claimed, for instance, like, which is different, because the United States the United States has a good function, right? But this is exactly like what people have always been, claiming, that President Trump is going to be this dictator. But the problem is he can only do so much. You understand? He can write executive orders, but there's a reason for why you have the Congress, right? The Congress is there to prevent that, regardless. So, and in this case, what we're seeing here is a bit of a flip, right? In what's happening, the Commission is kind of like the executive, branch, and then you have the Congress being the Parliament, the European Parliament, right? So we have, but yeah, so von der Leyen is kind of in the crosshairs right now, because, she's been around, she's been all around the place recently, involved in a lot of things, and the EU has been having already some difficulties with transparency. Now it's being kind of criticized or chastised because of this push for militarization. All of a sudden, funneling the money in that, and not in the other, what other people deem as more necessary issues, or so in May of 2025, the EU's General Court ruled that Commission President Ursula von der Leyen must release her 2021 text messages with Pfizer's CEO about vaccine deals. We touched on this, right, in a previous stream, calling the Commission's refusal to preserve them unjustified. The video explores 3 possible outcomes: full disclosure, a legal appeal to delay release, or a limited redacted publication. I'm going to go with the latter. I think it's going to be a limited redacted publication for sure. Yeah. With ongoing investigations by the European Public Prosecutor and other legal actions in Belgium, France, and the US, the case could have major implications for transparency and accountability in the EU. Ho, 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 here we go. Yeah, let's have a look at that.
This exactly how she negotiated with Pfizer.
Yeah. Let's play the I was just going to say this
text messages during the COVID-19.
It's a running gag at this point,
But let's rewind a bit to explain what's going on. Back in 2021, Europe was desperate for COVID-19 vaccines. And Ursula von der Leyen, as president of the European Commission,
shall we go with the 3 scenarios?
She negotiated a deal with Pfizer, Europe's biggest vaccine contract, and she did it partly over text messages. Yes, actual SMS messages between her and Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. Now, this deal was massive. By August 2023, the Commission had secured up to 4.6 billion vaccine doses at a very considerable price, with around 71 billion euros worth of contracts. Wow. And here's the problem.
Like, they're throwing these numbers as if it's, nothing. I mean, that's a lot of zeros.
At this point, it's like, a billionaire and a billionaire. Okay.
But let's see asked to see those messages under EU transparency rules. The Commission said they were lost. Gone. Super suspicious. And this obviously sparked outrage.
What does that remind you of?
Answers. Transparency watchdogs raised outrage. MEPs demanded answers. Transparency watchdogs raised alarms. And the New York Times actually sued the Commission in the Court of Justice of the European Union. That's how serious this became. Fast forward to now, and the General Court, the lower court within the Court of Justice of the European Union, has ruled against the Commission. Completely. The judges said the public has a right to know how this deal was made, and that includes von der Leyen's text messages with Pfizer's CEO. So, what happens next? Well, we see 3 possible scenarios. Scenario number 1. The Commission miraculously finds the texts and releases them, which brings us to 2 possible outcomes.
That when hell freezes over.
The messages are pretty harmless.
They'll never
Some of the
get
heat might die
them.
down,
she's
but
like
the damage is done. People will still ask why it took years to release them and whether something was being covered up.
Well, let's be quite
the texts
frank.
are clear,
The texts are not that harmless. You're talking about, what was it? 71 billion euros?
Billion, yeah.
Whenever that much money is involved, it doesn't matter what type of deal it is. It could be whatever, but those texts are not harmless. Let's be frank.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Let's be, come on.
Looks super
suspicious. What else there is.
But worse is option 1B. The texts are damaging. They could show that von der Leyen personally negotiated vaccine contracts, got a little too cozy with Pfizer, maybe even came under pressure from them, or completely sidestepped formal EU procurement rules. None of that looks good for her. She could face serious political fallout, public backlash, fresh investigations, and cannot be recovered. This will then result in a different kind of scandal. And yes, there is the nuclear option, where MEPs could vote von der Leyen out of office. And this brings us to our final scenario. The Commission appeals the ruling. It didn't think of
this. By the way, whenever there's fines, whenever there's because this is what gets to me, which actually is super annoying. Like there's a parliament investigation, or like when you have in the United States, there's these congressional hearings and investigations too. This all comes out of the public purse. This is all paid for by the public, and it's just wasting the public's money.
Exactly. Like all these procedures and courts and stuff, and like the parliament is gonna
they never get anything.
Exactly.
You don't get what you want at the end.
Like over here, the third option, commission appeals, delay verdict and buy time, and it's just more wasted money on procedures.
That's the ticket. That's the one I'm willing to bet. That's the one.
And tell you what, and to buy time, who knows what other deals they're gonna do in the meantime.
Exactly. That's the unfortunate reality.
They'll probably need to make money from elsewhere, like to pay this our money.
I hate to say it, but that's the most likely outcome here. That is, yeah.
All right.
Well, Ursula, I tell you, it's more and more turning out to be like she's the leader of the Spectre organization from James Bond because of the octopus, and her name is Ursula. Like we mentioned this as well before.
Yeah, like from The Little Mermaid, right?
Yeah. To be honest, she's not too far with that hairstyle. She's not too far off from that. You know, she's just not as large, let's say.
This one, right?
There you go, Spectre from James Bond. Yeah.